Welcome to the Our State Book Club podcast. I'm your host, New York Times bestselling author and North Carolina native Wiley Cash. In today's episode, we travel just west of Chapel Hill to the rural community of Clover Garden, where beloved writer and musician Bland Simpson has lived for 50 years. We'll talk about Bland's life and career and a journey that has seen him rambling far, far from home. Bland, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you, Wiley.
Well, we are here in Clover Garden, and it is a beautiful morning to be in a really beautiful place and in your home, so thank you for welcoming us. I want to begin our conversation by acknowledging that although your branches are here in Clover Garden and in Chapel Hill, your roots actually lie about 200 miles to the northeast in Elizabeth City. Can you talk about that landscape and how it left a lasting impression on you?
Well, yes, it's a river town.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth City is there because the federal government and the state governments of Virginia and North Carolina got together and built a canal, or helped a canal get going in the early 1790s to connect the Chesapeake and the Albemarle. The downtown is right there on the water, and the river makes a big hairpin curve or horseshoe curve and opens up and is really an embayment for the last 18 miles down to Albemarle Sound. So when you live proximate to a river, I mean, that's why the town is there. That influences the businesses with a lot of fishing boats at that time that would go down to the Sound, fish, come back, and there'd be our fish. But as a child, a river is just, a place to throw stones and oyster shells and stuff into, and play near carefully, always being warned and so forth. But it is the landscape, the sun shining on the water at the various times of day, and it becomes part of your psyche. And the activities on the water. One of the most dramatic when I was growing up down there was the International Cup Regatta, and these were speedboats that, in retrospect, look like a couple of 4x8 panels of plywood put together with an incredibly powerful motor on the back that threw up a 30 or 40-foot wake. These were very fast boats. They moved along the river at 90 or 100 miles an hour, and we couldn't wait to get out of school and go down to see the races that had been going on all day. And until one of them came apart.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, everything came apart. The whole machine. That was a very sobering thing to see at the age of about 8.
Sure, yeah.
So we realized, even as young people, boys and girls, all massed down there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we realized that this was not just fun.
Yeah.
On the river.
Yeah.
This was life and death.
Sure.
That was a big thing to witness.
I imagine. I mean, the place of your freedom and experience is also the place of great tragedy. That's kind of a tough push and pull of childhood to come to terms with at that age.
It sure made me love being on the water with my father in a 14-foot skiff with a 1.5 horse motor that was not going to move very fast.
I imagine so.
You recoil into where you think you can find safety.
Well, what about even a little bit farther north of Elizabeth City, the Great Dismal Swamp, and your experience writing and experiencing that landscape? How has that kind of shaped your appreciation for the vastness of North Carolina?
Going into the swamp, probably 4 dozen or more times to write about it. That's something I didn't do until much, much later. I was in my mid and late 30s, and as a boy, everyone, including me, was warned by parents and friends, don't ever go in the Great Dismal Swamp because your chances of getting lost are very high, and if you get lost in the swamp, nobody's going to come after you.
Wow.
And we heard all the kind of actual and apocryphal tales of runaway slaves and convicts and criminals that would hide out in there, and the law wouldn't go after them. It had that sort of, and it's not alone in that. There are certainly swamps up and down the southeast coast that have that kind of tale told about them. So I never went in. I just looked. I wanted to, because it's anyway. It says don't go there.
Sure.
A kid wants to go, but it is just a steady curtain of green, and you can't really know what's in there until you go. So I was in my I went in my mid-20s for a week with a pal. We went and camped back in there and canoed out to the middle of Lake Drummond, 2.5 mile north, south, east, west lake, beautiful lake. And we went out, sat under the harvest moon, listened to owls call each other. Very beautiful and spectral, and it didn't seem dismal at all.
So you landed in Chapel Hill as a young person. I think you were around 10 years old, and you grew up in Chapel Hill. We've talked, if folks want to check out my profile of you in the magazine, in the current edition of Our State, you talk about how your grandfather had a lot to do with the landscape and profile of the university in terms of building a lot of the buildings. And then you matriculated to the university at the height of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War protest. What kind of landscape was that like as a young person, politically, culturally, socially, to walk into this hive of activity?
It was scary.
Mm-hmm.
It was exciting, not necessarily all in good ways. The Ku Klux Klan ginned up a protest of its own on occasion, and we had civil rights groups. Congress of Racial Equality brought a lot of buses in one time, and we were warned, don't get involved in this stuff because you're going to get hurt. By we, I mean the high school students. But I worked at my uncle's stationery store downtown right next to Sutton's.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever there was a parade of any political stripe, I know that we would see it,
Sure.
Just out the store windows. And it was raucous, rude, but, when people want to change something, they will
Mm-hmm.
they'll be willing to be rude.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think exciting and more than a little bit scary.
Sure.
Because we were aware of groups of people being billy clubbed.
Does living through moments like that put into perspective political, cultural, historical moments that follow? Does it help you kind of gauge what political danger and political risk is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, coming through those things, yeah.
This is not play acting.
Mm-hmm.
This is...
It's not an intellectual exercise.
No.
Yeah.
You are on the line. Your thoughts are embodied in your own body.
Sure.
And if you're in a space that's contested in any way, there really is no exact telling what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And some people are there out of pure conviction, and they don't, come what may.
Mm-hmm.
Other people are there because it is exciting, and it's not only the politics of it, it's the, I don't know.
The charge of the
Yeah.
energy. Yeah. We are going to take a break, but we'll be right back with Bland Simpson. If you're enjoying this conversation with Bland Simpson, please join Bland, me, and our friend Clyde Edgerton for an evening of North Carolina literature and music on the evening of Thursday, June 26, at the Barn at Farrington Village in Pittsburgh, North Carolina. Books will be available to purchase from McIntyre's Books. You can find out more and get tickets at ourstate.com/trips.
This podcast is produced by Our State Magazine, celebrating North Carolina travel, food, history, and culture since 1933. Check out ourstate.com, where you can explore exclusive content like digital stories, YouTube videos, newsletters, and more. To have each month's issue delivered to your mailbox, visit ourstate.com/subscribe and enter promo code BOOKCLUB, one word, Book Club. That's BOOKCLUB for $5 off any regular or gift subscription.
We are back with Bland Simpson. So Bland, a lot of people know you as a professor, a lot of people know you as a writer, and a whole lot of people know you as a musician. You had a very celebrated and very storied career in music. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be?
I was living in the church in my second year at Carolina, downtown, the Methodist Church. I was my title was custodian, but there was an actual custodian who did that. But big churches like to have somebody living on the grounds that keeps the insurance down.
Interesting.
Yeah, not something I knew before, but I certainly benefited from. And the University Methodist Church, downtown Chapel Hill, has many a piano. And my main job was to lock all the doors, check them all, make sure they were locked at 9 o'clock. And it's a great big church. And so going all around it, I would see, that piano, the Wiley piano or the Scott piano. And I'd say, well, I haven't played that lately. I'd go in and I'd play for an hour. So I hadn't played piano much for some years, and I got back into it. And I got very much into Bob Dylan's work, particularly the album called Bringing It All Back Home. And I thought, I want to write songs like that. So I spent a lot of time banging on one piano or another in the church and starting to come up with this and that. And I eventually decided, well, I need to go see Bob Dylan and tell him I like his work and I want to do this kind of thing. And I did in December of 1968. I hitchhiked up to Woodstock. Was given a lot of help in terms of directions to go find Bob, and knocked on the door. He came to the door and came outside. It was extremely cold, and we had about a 45-minute conversation. And he was encouraging. He was very friendly. He said, "What did you want to do before you wanted to do this?" I said, "Well, I was going to be a lawyer." He said, "Well, you might want to think about that some more because the country's going to need a lot of good lawyers." Well, that's not what I wanted to hear exactly. So the next Easter weekend of 1969, I went to New York on the train. I think I had enough of long-distance hitchhiking by then, and went to Albert Grossman's office. Grossman was Dylan's manager. He also managed the band and Janis and Peter, Paul, and Mary. He invented Peter, Paul, and Mary. He put them together. And I went there because I knew he had publishing operations. And I wanted to see if I could be one of his songwriters. And I got a contract. And that led me to move to New York in the fall of '69 and start playing music with various ones and cut a record for Columbia, and was given good advice by Ed Freeman, who produced Don McLean's Miss American Pie.
Yeah.
And we were pretty good friends. And he said, you don't have to live here to do what you're doing. Why don't you go back to North Carolina, and all the stuff you write is about the South, and you'll save money.
Yeah.
And we talked about the music crowd that was here then. There was a huge bluegrass scene and old-time music scene and kind of acoustic rock more than hard rock. So I came back here and got involved with the people I knew, and we eventually put two bands together and created a musical, not something I had ever thought I would ever do. And we took that to New York and had a huge hit with it because it was a very novel, at that time, playing style for the musicians to be the sort of actors, but to be the ones who are telling the story. And it's very common now. But
And this was you and Jim Wan, right?
this is Jim Wan and our band, the Southern States Fidelity Choir, put together with the then Red Clay Ramblers. I was a member of the choir, not the Ramblers. But so we had 9 musicians as a core to tell the story of Jesse James, to tell a Robin Hood version of it. And it caught. And that playing style caught, and that sent at least 24 people into a subgenre or a sub-movement that we've been very lucky with. We've had a show in New York successfully, at least one every decade since the 70s.
That's incredible. And I know, the bands that I know in North Carolina, from Steep Canyon Rangers to the Avett Brothers, all of those bands owe a debt to the Red Clay Ramblers and that early 1960s, early 70s recall of roots music and bluegrass. And so to see those lines of descent continue to run and of course the Steep Canyon Rangers were founded at Chapel Hill. Those lines of descent are so cool.
It's great, and we in turn we knew the New Lost City Ramblers, all kinds of folks who were touring through here, because one of us, Jim Wan, with a couple others, founded the Cat's Cradle. So we met musicians that we would later see on the road, when we were out touring. So we have a lot of debts too,
Sure.
And Doc Watson was out and about.
Sure.
That was his first decade as a touring artist.
But I just feel like so many things that kind of moved Chapel Hill Carrboro as an intellectual, professional collegiate center into a cultural, artistic collegiate center happened under your hand in those 60s and 70s, and you and Jim and all of that cool stuff that was happening.
Yeah, we should mention the Hollow Rock String Band.
Okay.
Because that was extraordinarily popular. They were in Durham, but Tommy Thompson was in that band.
Yes.
He who co-founded the Red Clay Ramblers. And Hollow Rock did another thing. They went out under Alan Jabour's leadership. He later ran the Folk Life section of the Smithsonian. They went out and found, and in some cases saved, old mountain tunes that were down to being known by 1 or 2 people in 1 or 2 hollers.
Wow.
And they found these tunes, recorded them, and learned to play in mountain style and so forth, and save them. There's a very popular song that almost went defunct called "Over the Waterfall," and it was down to about the last man.
Oh, that's so cool.
So there was an intellectual, scholarly, musical component to what was translated into very popular concert and dance evenings and that kind of thing. And then the Ramblers, we were very happy they teamed up with us, because it was our idea to do the Jesse James musical. They came in and they brought these considerable, deeply informed musical skills to bear on an original theatrical
interesting
notion. So
What
there
a
were a
partnership.
lot of happy accidents in that main launch.
Gosh. Well, this has been so wonderful, and we are going to close out. We have, for the past year, closed out with the North Carolina Lightning Round, where I ask questions about North Carolina, but we're going to dig a little deeper with you, given your background. And I want to ask you about 3 albums, or maybe a handful of albums, that have really influenced you. And you mentioned one of Dylan's albums a few moments ago, and Dylan's effect on your career, kind of as a guiding force, cultural, artistic guiding force. What are some other albums that have really resonated with you over time, or maybe still are?
Well, when I first moved here, when I was 10 and a half, one of the most active businesses downtown was Kemp's Record Store. Kemp at that time sold more LP albums than anybody else in the South.
Wow.
He was selling out of an enormous store. Right.
Where was it at?
The building was a frame building, kind of between where Linda's has been for many years and the Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
2-story frame building, burned down years later. But he had every kind of album you could imagine, and many you might couldn't. But then he would shut the store down on a Saturday afternoon, and he'd go out for a couple of days and distribute albums all around the South.
Wow.
From a big old station wagon. And I remember 2 songs in particular that were always one or the other was always playing, and in there at that time. And one was the Kingston Trio's MTA,
Mm-hmm.
The Man Who Never Will He Ever Return, The Man Who Never Returned. And the other was Take 5,
Mm-hmm.
with that beautiful, beautiful Paul Desmond
Mm-hmm.
playing. I didn't know Paul Desmond's name then. I just
Yeah.
knew these sounds were to be had, and there are others.
Sure.
But Kingston Trio and the great Brubeck
Yeah.
Quartet with Take 5. And it was be 5 more years or so before bringing it all back home would
Yeah.
come out. In the meantime, Peter, Paul, and Mary popularized Dylan.
Sure.
And we heard their music a lot. And I wasn't one of them, but there were quite a number of people who had guitars and learned to sing the Peter, Paul, and Mary versions of other folks' songs, and then we would sing them. And then there was the civil rights. Civil rights was in the air, so these were songs that people were singing. And in school, the Taylor family, James and Kate and Liv, they learned all these songs, and they were starting, I think, to write their own.
I didn't even think about James Taylor being there when you were there.
Same class. And James and Kate and Liv would lead these hootenannies at school, and there would be about 50 or 60 people would come. We'd sit in the bleachers in the gym, and they were performing, but they were mainly leading the group. And very generous. They did it quite a number of times on Saturday nights, and we had to take our shoes off and walk on the gym floor in our socks and that kind of thing. But we all learned these songs, and they were the band, and there were others too. But I remember how much fun it was to hear them play. They were very skillful on the guitar, that hammer-on style that James is very much known for. He had already perfected it by 8th grade.
Wow.
So that was, we never dreamed that.
I can hear that style in my head as you're saying that.
Oh yeah,
His guitar playing.
He took full advantage of it. It's a beautiful instrumental
Sure,
style.
it is.
And certainly he built wonderful chord structures that were graced by that distinctive style. And but there it was in the room. And
so cool.
So I would say, those the Peter, Paul, and Mary early albums, and I can hear MTA and Take 5 like it's playing right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And the early Dylan stuff, and then the band. I loved the
Sure.
band, and I had friends who hipped me to early Randy Newman. And,
Yeah.
and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Great songwriters.
Great writer.
And who created great characters.
Sure.
The 3-minute novel.
Absolutely. Well, Bland, this has been such a treat, and I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What might it be like underneath the sunrise in a state of flight? Coming back on me, it seems wonderful, the wandering mountain birds on a beach. Never moments ever wasted, turning away from your love. Honeybees, gardens of sweeter fruit never tasted, no turning to other things. Will you be, will you seem? Sweeter fruit never tasted, don't turn your back on me. Mountains pushing into the sea.